and talking to ourselves. We literally cannot do anything without being with other people. So if we're not open to that, we won't be able to be effective. But we work in the open, and GitHub is just one teeny tiny way to work in the open, and it's in with publishing your code. But there are, how many other things do we do? Even if you're a developer that only develops, how many other things do you do in your day that is not publishing code? It's 80% of what anybody does. So we have to work in the open. We have to talk about our budgets, our ways of doing things, our, how we came about inviting people to this conference. And we do that. On our website, we constantly publish how-tos. How are we doing the live streaming, which I don't think is working right now. How much did that machine cost? How did we set it up? We do that all the time. So we have to be open. Everyone. I know a lot of your organizations, and this fascinates me because I've never been in, before I was at Smart Chicago, I helped start that site, Every Block. And I've always been on the web for most of my professional career. So I've never been in philanthropy, and I've never been in like social service, and I've never been in this world. And there's a feature of this world where it's important to drill down into a particular geographic area, a particular type of person, a particular type of need, a particular, it's called focus, and it's really important, and I think it's a real characteristic of success. However, where I come from in technology, if you don't include everyone, it won't work. So I can't focus on just people with less money. I can't focus on people in just one particular part of town. The internet wouldn't work if everybody wasn't included, or at least had the ability to be included. So we focus on everyone, and we think that makes us unique. And we focus on Chicago. It's our middle name, and but we seek to do things otherwise. So a lot of times I say open means open, and I like tautologies because tautologies are tautologies. No, no. What I meant is because they're always true. And open means open is awesome because lots of times, you're open and someone say, you know what, you're really full of crap, and everything you just said is wrong. And if you're open, then you're like, oh, shit, that's right. I actually am wrong. I actually do have to change it. And when this happens in open source code all the time, it won't run, or it's dumb, or it's an inelegant way of doing things. And then someone comes in and says, somebody from out of nowhere has the right to tell you that you're wrong. And based on the principles of open source software, we accept that pull request. In life, we're accepting pull requests all the time. It's like being receptive to criticism. These are, and Dan, you and I were talking about, like, and as you said in your finish, we talk about open gov, open data, open, and these principles, it does come down to the principles, are really helpful to me. I'm not a super technical person, so that's helpful to me. And it is hard because you do have to listen. And I think that there is a general desire to listen. When I work in the civic tech world or in the technology world, there's an awful lot of hell, in any world there's a lot of platitudes. They're like, we're community driven, we're youth driven, we're elderly driven, we're everybody's driven by something other than they feel like doing, supposedly. But I think a lot of times they end up doing what they feel like doing, right? So in order to actually be noun-driven, is it noun? Yeah, noun-driven, youth-driven, adjective. Yeah, noun-driven. You have to be able to listen. And you can't listen unless you have actual methodologies for listening. That's because you can't just say it. You can't just say that you're X-driven. So, and you guys, if you're a part of this conference, you've seen these forms, these WUFU forms. WUFU is a wonder. Okay, WUFU is my solution. You're all nails, and WUFU's a hammer. Okay, believe me, WUFU can solve any problem in the world. WUFU can solve hunger, as far as I'm concerned right now, because WUFU is amazing. We use this for everything we do, as you can see. This ecosystem connections thing. We get feedback. The presenters, all the presenters filled out and it's just structured data. But what it is a lot of times, I think here in Chicago, and I don't have any experience anywhere else, I get this a lot. That's like, well, I didn't get that email. Wait, can you invite me to your meeting? And it makes no sense to me. There is no email. There is no list. There is no, it's on the internet is often my answer, and it frustrates people sometimes. It's on the internet. Everybody's invited. If you think you're included, you are. That concept of being open, it's hard. And this is one tiny little way that allows me to execute on that. And then you have to listen. You have to, respond to what you hear and modify your operations, or you're full of crap, right? If you're not going to accept pull requests, why the hell do you have your content, your code on GitHub? It's meaningless. It lacks integrity. And I think that's what you're getting at, Dan, in terms of building community and being a part of a community. If you throw code over the GitHub wall and run as fast as you can in the other direction, your actions have no integrity. And if you have no integrity, then you're done. There's nothing you can do. You have nowhere to go. And I think that the obverse is actually true as well. Sometimes, and this is what I'm really passionate about, is that we have these modes of being completely GitHubby. It's like pull request welcome is probably the best manifestation of that. When you have on your website pull request welcome, it's like, wow, these people are in it to win it. They're open. They're here to really support their code. Of course, what that means is if you're smart enough to interact with us in the way in which we choose to interact with you, we're down with talking to you. If you're not smart enough to hang with me, we have nothing to say to each other. That's what pull request welcome means to me. Unless you have a feedback form, unless you have an accessible way for people to contact you, unless you are actually, people like email. Email is a pretty accessible tool. Those things, we forget about those things, I think. And I've learned in doing this project, I actually came up with a new concept, which is open data imperialism. And Andrew Cedar helped us get over this, because we were asking questions early on that were judgmental. We were asking questions like, how open are you? Well, in that question, there's some judgments. And if the answer is, I'm not open, I think you're a jerk, right? I mean, because I'm asking that question, how open are you? I'm making a series of judgments in asking that question. And instead, you'll see in this, and we'll talk about it as time goes on, and as we do our report, we have to understand where people are in terms of the types of data if you're really open with your data and you're dealing with the current status of homeless people, you're a jerk, right? I mean, so they're actually doing everything they can to protect humanity. And here I come at them and say, well, what about the way I think about things? Do you think about things the way I think about things? So we really learned a lot from this project, and I got over my open data imperialism, I think. We'll see, because I still have some issues. Who doesn't have issues? It's not time to work on my issues, is it, Dan?
Not yet.
All right. I have many problems. Anyway, so this may be rudimentary, but I've run across this in lots of organizations. If you have, there's some misconceptions sometimes in nonprofits, I think, about open source. I think that whenever someone comes at you and say, hey, we're going to do an open source thing, they immediately think that they can't own it, or they can't control it, or they can't, that it won't be theirs, that they have to have it be in this, communist ethos of everyone, or we're all around a campfire and everybody's swaying to kumbaya, it's a misconception, right? You can own any manifestation of your expression of an open source project. Has anybody ever used WordPress to make a website here? I remember. WordPress, of course, is one of the most successful pieces of open source software. There's a teeny fraction of the world who's working on actual core WordPress code, but there is 20% of the freaking internet is run off of WordPress. So there's this teeny tiny fraction of people who are actually contributing to WordPress, .org code base, but there's this vast preponderance of people who use a single manifestation of that open source thing to create something they own. You can own the URL, right? I've come across this, that people think that they don't own their website because it's built on open source software. Of course you own the URL. I mean, you go to GoDaddy. I still use GoDaddy. I know that's not a polite thing to do these days, but I was too lazy to move them over when the internet went crazy about how freaked out they are. But I didn't do it. Anyway, I'm not on Namecheap. You can flagellate me if you like. But so, you see these URLs, adoptasidewalk.org, Snow Dashboard. We haven't done anything with that. That'd be nice. Govdata.co, Smart Chicago apps. We have, I don't know, 40 URLs at Smart Chicago. The funny thing, right, so the brand, right, if you create a website called Jimmy Two Times, he always says everything twice. I got to go get the papers. So you get jimmytwotimes.com. I better buy that right now. You own that. You can do anything you want with that. That is an object that you own. You can put all the open source code in the world on that. It still belongs to you, right? It's a misconception I hear all the time with nonprofits. They think that if they get involved in this open source game, that they can't own their thing. The trade dress, the thing itself, you own it. The funny thing, and this is a really interesting manifestation of the work that we do at Smart Chicago. I work at the Chicago Community Foundation, the region's community foundation. And it is a place that over the last 100 years is a place for shared community assets. And I know this morning, in fact, in the affordability, infrastructure affordability, we're talking about why isn't there some sort of shared software infrastructure, right? That is a really good idea. And as we move forward, the idea of a community foundation and what a community foundation does, I think that we can do stuff like that. The Chicago Community Trust owns every URL that we do at Smart Chicago, including Foodborne Chicago, which is an asset that is used by the Chicago Department of Public Health all the time. ChicagoEarlyLearning.org, which is an asset that Terry Mazzani, who runs the trust, owns and controls. Could put anything he wants on that URL, but it is a really helpful tool for Chicago Public Schools and Department of Family and Sports Services focused on early childhood. So it's this weird concept of the community foundation now owning different types of assets, not just fiscal assets, not just physical assets that help the community or trust assets, but actual technology assets. So this idea of a technology infrastructure, I'm buying it. So they own all the. I just talked about some of these, right? Chicago Health Atlas, which was funded by the Otho S.A. Sprague Memorial Institute. These are things that become quasi-official tools of other people besides me, but that we own, control, manage. It's a conceptual thing. So let's talk a little less about code, because code is boring. 38,000 photos. Has anybody here ever used a photograph that I took? You did? Yeah, Brennan. I'll take it. Lindsay. Come on. I bet half of the people in this room have used a photograph. If you've made a website in your life or published anything in Chicago that had a Chicago picture, I bet if you got any pictures off Flickr that are on Creative Commons that have to do with Chicago, I probably took at least one of them. I have 38,000 photographs that belong to me, that I am in control of, that are my property, that I have published on the internet for free. And they're used all over.
And licensed.
And they're licensed, exactly. I choose under the Creative Commons license. It's not some wackadoo communist, off the rails thing. This is absolutely in line with the Copyright Code of the United States of America. I decided that I want them to use it for free. Even this guy. next to me. I took this photograph of him at his house on the day that it was revealed that he was running this Mayor Emanuel Twitter account. And I did it because the story was published in the Atlantic, which is not an insignificant, small little organization, but they didn't have a photo of Dan Sinker with the freaking account up on his phone, right? And the guy's in California sleeping at 7 o'clock in the morning when I had to get up there, so I'm like, I'll go take that picture. So I went and I took this picture. I took this reveal. It was an amazing day for me, man. It was like I gave it to him for free. Why? Because it's fun. And if it's not fun, why the hell would you do it, right? That's the only reason we should do anything. I forgot to put fun in my principles. But anyway, so I took these photos. And again, so it's in line with that idea of it's not just about code and this concept of being open. So I want to, if there's anything that I think it would maybe hopefully kick off the rest of our discussion, is I want to think about and talk about how we can apply these principles of open source, of being open to revisions, to our work, the offline work that we all do together. And that's all we had for, so.
Yeah.
We got forever, don't we? Do we have like forever? What time is it? And what's it go to?
3.
Yeah, we got
Yeah.
forever. We got. Yep.
All right. I think there's a difference between just being open and being accessible. So one of the best things that happened to me in the last year and a half is I discovered GitHub, and I'll go to folks and I'll say, oh, I got this code posted on GitHub. You can find it on GitHub, but they don't know what that is. They don't know how to use it. And it's kind of like all right, well, it's out there, but you gotta figure out how to use it. So honestly, I don't want to talk about code. I'm like you, Dan. I kind of wanted to invite you to talk about this as kind of like the position that Chicago School of Data has in terms of creating access. Because we're not here to talk about just code or technology. We're here to talk about having the community meet around this.
Yep.
But Chicago Data Days, this is not going to happen in like on a weekly or regular basis.
Yep.
So what do you or like what do folks in the community have to say about how to get access to be happening for materials that are out in the city right now?
So, what do folks in the community think about that?
Can I make a small distinction that I think would be valuable? Just, Git and GitHub are different, and I think that a lot of the things that you're saying are actually referring to Git, and because GitHub is a host that accesses Git, and I think it's confusing. Like, we were actually just talking about this.
Git is a protocol.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
GitHub is a brand name.
Right, and I just wanted to point that out real quick, just because I felt like that was something that was kind of missing when we were, that's it.
GitHub is
And good
actually
point.
just one manifestation
Yeah.
of that created a community around a set of protocols
Yeah,
for
GitHub is
change
a-
management in Git. And certainly the guy who invented Git feels the same way. He can't
Yeah.
stand GitHub.
So, to this brother's point, I'm yearning to find a way to bring this mojo of the problem solvers and let's call them tool builders to the people who are fighting for social justice in Chicago right now. So this has been a frustration of mine as an organizer and educator. I'm here to learn and to try to figure this out. Because I feel there's a lot of smart people, there's a lot of good parts who know how to do shit. But we're not hooking you up or us up in an effective way with people who are fighting for their lives right now in Chicago. We're talking about they're losing their homes and their violence and all the litany of issues that we know that Chicago is close to. But there are groups that are working in the field on these issues, and they can use some of the mojo that is in the room. I don't know what else to do about that other than just constantly.
I mean, I think that's part of the motivation of bringing everyone together in the room, right? I mean, I think that to me, I think there are two points there, and they're actually different points, right? One is hard, and that is, how do I get someone that has technical ability to be excited and turned on at my project so that they'll devote time and energy and resources towards it. That's really hard to do, though not impossible. I think the thing that is a lot easier is, how do the people that are in this room that are all solving similar problems get more effective and better at comparing notes and sharing process and making life easier for each other, right? In the earlier session that I was in around kind of data privacy and informed consent around using data, there was a pretty good discussion at the very end about, hey, I've got this consent form, right? And this person had this consent form, and is there a way that we could put these consent forms up, which we did with a lawyer or whatever, in a way with a downloadable open source license, which is key, right? So that other people can go and do it, right? I mean, how many different ways do we need to write a consent form, right? Like, there's probably, 7/10 of it is boilerplate that all of them need, and 3/10 of it is actually directed towards the thing you're doing, right? So do we all need to get a lawyer to help us write that same consent form over and over and over again? Or can we, can somebody who's done it get it up there, somewhere where other people can get at it, and then those people have a license to do it? This the reason I keep hitting on this is it's actually illegal if you just stick it up there and you're like, anyone can use this. You can't. Unless you've specifically put some kind of license on it, you're in violation of copyright, right? Dan's 38,000 photos are up there with Creative Commons licenses, which is different than me just searching Chicago on Google Image Search and copying the first photo out, right? That kind of thing, that kind of pooling of resources and of knowledge in a way that allows for saving time and energy and resources is exactly what the open source software movement does really, really well, right? But it is not at all unique to software, and in fact, it's hugely more impactful when it leaves software, right? And gets into things like this. So to me, I think the question is, how do you reproduce something like this, which is a very easy way to bump into someone and say, oh, whoa, you're doing this, I'm doing that too, but I'm 20 miles over to the west from you, so we didn't know that, right? But how do you create those kind of central places that allow for that kind of knowledge sharing and that kind of asset sharing, so that we can all do this work more effectively? I think that's that's a solvable problem, and I think B, that's something that a forum like this can really begin to tackle.
So, Nick, to address the core of your question, which is how do we create human systems that allow for that kind of sharing, and what can Chicago School of Data do around that? The short answer is we kind of can't do anything because we're not really something, right? And I don't mean to diminish it, but Chicago School of Data is just it's a concept that may or may not take off, right? But I know that everything that we, as Brenna said this morning, the only reason it has any legs whatsoever is because of the work that people already do. So, there are a lot of groups already that do convenings, and that, OpenGov Hack Night every single week on Tuesday nights. It's just great. It's an amazing resource. NTED. There are a lot of organizations that do stuff, and I think just supporting that and getting people to know more about that, I think they're all and finding out, frankly, this is one of the things that's our job to do, is what's missing. Those things are nice, but they're not 100% accessible to everybody. You got to be a nonprofit if you're going to be an NTED. You got to have some semblance of coding expertise or interest to be at OpenGov Hack Night and make it meaningful. We created a group called Civic User Testing Group, at Smart Chicago, where we have more than 800 people. Who's a member of Cook Group here? Anybody get our emails? Lola, you're on the Cook Group? All right. Cook Group is fun. We did that in response to one of the problems he described, that people aren't included. So the Civic User Testing Group is just a set of regular Chicago residents who get paid to test civic apps. If you sign up at cookgroup.org, I will send you a $5 Visa gift card today. All right, well, Monday we'll send it. We're busy today. And then we invite you to come into public computer centers and test civic apps, and you get a $20 Visa gift card and some candy. So I mean, we do that, and it creates this communion, this feeling and attitude of being together and thinking about things together. So I think we need more of that, but we need to be a little more deliberate in figuring out what it is that's needed. So hopefully we're going to head in that direction. Imogen?
Yeah, I don't know. I came in a little late, but I don't know if you guys mentioned Wikipedia itself. But
We didn't.
Yeah, but I think one of the things that's exciting about this model of doing things is that it allows innovation to happen in uncontrolled, wild ways that make it possible for things to move forward that in the past were always planned. There was this top-down planning economy. I don't know if you guys remember Encarta, which was this $250 million acquisition by Microsoft to come up with the online repository of all knowledge, which completely fell down and fell on its...
Or Britannica here in the city, same deal, yeah.
Curated content that was supposed to be the end-all be-all of human distilled knowledge, and open source techniques using wikis basically, put that to an end. And it's really a type of energy that can be harnessed if applied to the right problem. So, and technology and sort of the scale at the city level where it affects a lot of lives, it makes perfect sense to start thinking about these types of technologies, because cities are very similar, yet distinct in character, but the needs are very, very similar. So I think we're seeing a lot of cities adopting open source as a reason for that. And if more of that could be done in a systematic way, that'd be great.
How about some of your projects? Who's running an open source project here? Anybody?
There's a hand back
Rose,
there.
come on, what do you got? Talk about it.
Hey everyone. My name is Rosa Crier. I'm actually here documenting, and I'm also here with Team M Relief. M for Midwest, Mobile, and My. And basically what we do is we have created a Ruby on Rails open source platform that enables people to see whether they qualify of a website application that enables people to see if they qualify for social service benefits in the city of Chicago. So that has been a whole lot of fun. It was actually, in a lot of ways, it was birthed on OpenGov Hack Night. So the mayor's office actually sometimes attends that space, and we sort of started a dialogue right then and there about open data and also about some of the challenges that everyday people who are applying for government benefits have. I think it's been extremely important. For example, at least just this past week, someone had a pull request for M-Relief on GitHub because they wanted to help translate some of our questions into Spanish, for example. So I think, and that's a skill set that we currently didn't have on our team. So I think it just sort of reinforces the point that you have to be brave and put your stuff out there. And it's going to be a combination of not just sort of someone in the sort of World Wide Web, the wild World Wide Web, but it was someone also who I had met and had developed a relationship with at OpenGov, and had been announcing every week, hey, this is really great, but at a certain point we're really going to need to have these forms translated into Spanish and in Polish, because we live in Chicago and those are important languages here as well. And so I think it's been a really great lesson to have someone actually answer the call, right? And not just in the World Wide Web, but in real time. So that's been my experience, and I'm really excited about open stuff, open source code, and just open human interaction.
That's a really important point, and it's related to that Wikipedia example. I think a lot of people get the idea that it is this completely uncontrolled random thing that happens, but as you said, it was offline relationships that led to that online pull request.
And built over time too, you know,
the
and
relationships,
and, by doing kind of the work and advocacy work that is needed to have it be noticed, right? And then when the time came that it was like, here's a concrete ask, right? That's the other thing that's really hard, is to just like contribute, right? It's like, cool, but I'm not going to hunt around until I find something I can contribute to. Like, what do you need? And can I contribute that? I think that kind of stuff, that kind of stewardship of code is vital for the success of open source projects. The same way it's vital for the success of any project, right? Like, you can't start a nonprofit and just throw it out on the street and be like, cool, there's it is, right? Like, there's my thing. You know, you have to put the work in, and you have to do that kind of advocacy work and community building work around it. And then you've got the right ask at the right time with the right person, right? And suddenly you've got Spanish, right? And then you've got, as soon as you can be like, look, it's in Spanish, someone else will be like, well, I speak Polish. You know, I mean, it's like that kind of stuff then begins to build, but it doesn't happen overnight, for sure.
Yep.
So, I just wanted to add to the Emerleaf thing. I'm helping out on it as well, and I'm doing mainly design and front end, and it wasn't until I started really helping out on this that I realized I have a say in what the city does, and I think that's really something that needs, I mean, we live in Chicago, we live in, you know, in a city, and that's kind of how we find out about all these things. We go to meetups, we go to all these different organized things to get more knowledge, but then I start to think about, it wasn't until I went to something that I got all this information. I think about the people who don't even know that they can do this. People, let's say, who live in the suburbs, even in the suburbs, or in a neighborhood where they don't have any access to code or type of information. How do we start thinking about those places and like lifting people up to think that they have a say in all this information and how they can edit and update and change without needing to be tech savvy. So, anybody wants to talk about that?
Awesome. What else we got? Yep, Tom.
So the TIF illumination project, tax increment financing, combines data mining, graphic design, map making, investigatory reporting, and community organizing to hit what we were just asking. So people want to know how their money is being used or abused in the city. And TIFs is $500 million of property tax. So it's a big deal. It's in the news. It has to do with everything from how your schools are operating to other essential services. So it's a kind of a core issue. So what drives people, and we've done 27 public meetings, 3,600 people have come to it. What drives the neighbor to come to the meeting to imbibe of this information is like, I want to know where my money is. They closed the school, blah, blah, blah. Help me understand it. What we'd like to build is people come and we only have so much information. So if a project was funded by TIFs in your community and it has the obscure name like North Branch LLC, $3 million. People go, what is that? We don't know. We wish there was something you can click on. Would you like to get the information? So what's happening is people are now becoming crowdsourced journalists. Because they're so angry, they want to go out and knock on some door and find out, who are you and why did you get $3 million of my dollars? What did you do with it, etc. So there's a potential there to take that and turn it into the entire city budget of Chicago. Every line item on the city's budget could potentially be online. And we know there are people and neighbors all over the city who are involved in their communities and they're experts in one issue or another. What we'd like to do is give them the opportunity to take a little bite of the apple online, offline, and go out and fill in those line items one by one. So I think there's a potential where an open source tool could turn into a crowdsourced organizing tool.
And in that instance, it's not technology that will give you the answer to the question, what is blah blah LLC? It's a series of data structures that, rolling up, of course, to the state, which does the incorporation, that is
Right,
out of the control of the entity that controls
The
TIPS.
illuminator, the civic illuminator, the citizen illuminator would have access to LexisNexis court records to peel the, what is it, who owns North Branch LLC?
Mm-hmm.
Eventually, there is a name. You can physically go to the address and take a picture of this, upload it. You can call someone on the phone or visit them and basically say, you're on the record. Everything you say will be published online. What did you do with our $3 million?
Mm-hmm.
And then just record and upload whatever the response is. Fuck you, who are you? I don't have to answer your questions, or whatever happens. But it seems as though we're getting to a space where even the average citizen who doesn't have any of the tools that we have in here have the appetite and energy to do all these things that we're speaking of. We just need to give them a little help.
Speaking with did you get it? Oh, okay.
Yeah, I think
The
it's
non-average citizen, Lola, what do you got?
I think it's easier than all of that. In Chicago, we have, I think, a Democratic mayor for 50 years. I mean, you just have to go red, blue, red, blue. You don't have to pursue anything. You just have to go from party to party until a party does what they're supposed to do. But with one party, it doesn't happen. So all the talking and all the data and all of the whatever still won't motivate the voter to do what capitalism is supposed to do. Swing between parties. Chicagoans won't do that. They're married to one party.
Well, didn't work out too well for Bernie Epton, did it? Anybody remember Bernie Epton? Well, what else we got? Yep.
So, I think it's I'm thinking about I've done a little bit of work on trying to start an open source project, and the Open Gov Hack Night like Rose, and I don't even want to talk about that. What I do want to talk about is it's really interesting how difficult it is to bring the right people together and how to really get something going. And if you think about like really successful software, like say YouTube, like I think when Google bought YouTube, there were only a few engineers, right? I mean, it was a pretty small organization, and it was a big website. I mean, it did a lot of things, and it's like kind of magical. Like I think when the right pieces come together, that makes something that's valuable, that makes something that's modular, that's actually has good software engineering, and then also has like great design, that also has the intelligence to make all the things work. Yeah. I mean, you said like how to tap all the mojo in the room, and one of the interesting things I found is that it's not even that easy. You get a lot of smart people together, and it might not even be the right smart people yet.
Yeah.
It's really hard to figure out how to make something materialize, and I think that those first few steps are just really the most critical ones. Because once you have something like Ember.js up and running, and it's not too hard. Well, it's not easy. I couldn't do it, but it's easier to translate that into Polish than saying, well, should we make an Ember.js? Or it's Ember.js, right?
Ruby on Rails.
Yeah, it's Ruby on Rails actually.
But
the gem, I'm not
your
sure.
project though, the Amberleaf. Sorry,
Yeah.
I forgot that. I was totally missing. I knew I was saying the wrong name because it had an M in it. Anyhow, but once you have this nugget, it's easier to have contributors, and it's easier to find roles and dish things out. But anyhow, I think you get the point. How do you start those? I'd like to hear more about successful projects and how they get going. Kind of like a good to great sort of.
Okay, so more of that, showing more of that. Yep.
I think in order to get I work with 2 open source projects that are really widely adopted in the nonprofit world, and I think sometimes it takes just a leader to start a project, and then other people find it useful and spreads virally, but that takes a year, right? It takes 5 years. But then sometimes, unlike in foundations or individuals and contribute money and get something started on the basically bankroll the initiation of it, and then have to sort of create the gravity for other people then to contribute back to it. And that's happened to the city CRM project that I'm involved in.
How does the money help?
Well, it helps have dedicated developers that are not just doing this and they have 3 hours of spare time, but do it full time, and allows you to build a team of say 5 to 6 developers that then start working on it. You actually don't need more than 2 developers at the beginning, but it gets that ball rolling, which is sort of that initial friction that you need to overcome in order to get other people to join in.
I would just add to that too. The Hive Network is a project of the MacArthur Foundation, and they've done an amazing job of getting people to work together because they just really put in place this structured way that people meet up regularly and have the grants are basically just reasons to partner. And so it's just little prototyping of how a partnership works and the tools that you need to do it. But I've watched it kind of go from 3 years ago. It was pretty disorganized, and it did take a lot of it took a lot of the institutional support.
So you gonna say something, Matt?
Oh, I was just going to say that there's sort of an institutional resistance as well, and sometimes money may help with that. Like, Jen and I, big plans to put in some open source data collection stuff at the school district, but there just wasn't the infrastructure for us to do it easily and cleanly, and then so to do it, to kind of do it in a rough way, we were more limited funding wise.
Mm-hmm. Was it you, Jim? Yeah.
So, at the Red Cross, we developed, this is really our first open source project we've ever done, and that's because we don't actually have the blessing of our organization to do it. We just decided to build an application to manage the 65,000 disaster responses that our volunteers go on a yearly basis. And we've been, I think, surprisingly successful. It manages incidents in about 20% of the country. But one of the points I took from your comments was that it's just there on GitHub, but we haven't driven people to it. We've kind of kept it our own little secret and kind of stayed under the radar. And now that you mention this, I realize we're keeping something that's successful that that incorporates Twilio and dispatches our volunteers and tracks. That we're actually keeping that from people who could benefit.
Yeah.
So
I mean,
I appreciate that comment.
Yeah, I mean, documentation is work, right? And I think that's the thing that's hard in the kind of journalism tech world that I work in. There's a lot of talk of deadline-driven development, right? I mean, you're developing apps in 2 days or less, in response to what's happening in the world. And the newsrooms that are best at this, right? The New York Times being the kind of world leading at this point. They have huge dev teams that full of some of the best coders in the world, right? They put most of their stuff on GitHub. It's technically available, right? But not a lot of it is documented. Not a lot of it is available. So that's actually one of the things that we're doing now with OpenNews is just talking to news orgs and saying, hey, what have you written, right? That's not just solving your problem, but solving problem that others have as well, that we could grab 2 of your developers, take them to Portland, Oregon for 2 days, feed them well, and have them write that documentation, right? Or do the half day of abstraction work to get it out of your code, purely linked into your code and available for other ones. And we've been calling those code convenings, and they've been hugely successful, right? Just giving people time to write the documentation, right? If you're doing projects where you want to be creating the work you're doing open source, factor the time to document into the overall project and make sure your engineers have that moment. They want to write it, right? And the reason they want to write it is because they built half of it on open source code that the only reason they could do it was because it was documented, right? They want to put back into that community the same way that any of us want to put back into a community. But man, documentation just takes time, right?
So besides documenting, are there other strategies? Obviously, there are all kinds of things we'd like to do with this application.
Yeah.
To make
I mean, an organization.
Are there other ways of kind of inviting people?
Yes. So an organization the size of the Red Cross, right? You could be having hack days, right? All over the world if you wanted. I mean, you've got that reach. where you partner with a university or with something like an OpenGov Hack Night kind of thing, and you bring people together and let them jump into the code and start seeing what they do with it, right? I mean, there's also, though, I mean, you said this is the first project because the org above you, they've wanted to hold on, right?
Take that
Yeah.
traditional RFP
Yeah,
approach
and
to
it's
software development.
scary to say, okay, we're going to open up this code, we're going to let people root around in it, and we're going to have people come up with stuff that we might not endorse, right? I mean, how many god awful, like, avoid this neighborhood apps have been made off of civic data, right? Like, they're horrible, right? And they're racist and awful, but that's what happens when you open up data. People begin to come up with uses of it, you know, that you don't expect. And for all the bad ones, there are incredible ones. And I think especially with something like this, that kind of stuff is really important. I mean, that was with OpenNews, the best tool we have for getting engineers that don't realize that news is amazing for their talents and a place that they want to go is having hack events around the world, because they get to play for a little while in the way that an engineer is comfortable playing, right? And that's an important part. And again, that's community building 101, right? Come at people where they are, right? Don't say, hey, you're an amazingly talented engineer, I want to talk to you about poverty in Chicago. Come to an 8-hour, come to an 8-hour conference, because within 20 minutes their laptop's going to be open and they're going to be coding on something else, right? Because you're not talking to them in their language. You need to, demonstrate that this is a place that they want to play. I mean, the scope of OpenNews is global, and Chicago is unbelievable as a civic hacking community, right? And that's thanks to the work that Dan and Joe and everyone has done to build the Civic Data Hack Nights, right? And that's just putting in the work, right, of a physical community, of making sure there's a place, and making sure that you're fed, and making sure that the people that are showing up feel welcome. And part of that feeling welcome is we're speaking the language that you're showing up expecting to be spoken in, right? And that means talking to an engineer and engaging an engineer in a way that they want to be engaged. So, yeah, you guys should do hack nights for sure. You're the Red Cross.
I'd be remiss if I didn't. I love what you had to say about like sharing successes and how do you actually get it done. I think that's like what I do for a living. I pay my mortgage at work every day because
It's not your images.
it's not. Oh yeah, I better.
It's not your open source images, I mean.
But what? Yeah, that's not helping anybody. But here's an example, and we do a lot of this documenting and just telling these stories. A really good example that I'm really personally proud of. We helped make this site called Expungio.
Yeah.
Expungio is a website that allows people to kick off the process of expunging their juvenile records. It has. It's just a short story, but it's a good one because it delves into all sorts of places. Lindsay, you mentioned the Hive Learning Network. In part because of the Hive Learning Network, that's why Expungio exists. Like because of OpenGov Hack Night, that's why Expungio exists. Because of Northwestern Computer School, that's why Expungio exists. It's all of those things. Kathy Deng is a developer here in Chicago who was working as a consultant for Capgemini. Just as a, statistics person who came to OpenGov Hack Night, she came to my office for open hours. I just literally did O hours and tweeted it, and she showed up and was like, I want to do civic tech projects.
See, it'd be interesting to know, like, who wrote the first line of code, and what was what was that process like? Have you ever seen that New York Times website where they show what their process looks like for making a visualization?
Yeah.
And the first few snapshots are terrible. I mean, they look nothing like the final product, and they're incomprehensible. They're like, how are we going to show, the impact of like something really boring, like, long-term interest rates on like mortgage defaults or something, and then.
and she got that. This was in August 2013, and like 4 months later, we were on Twitter at night saying, and Chris Rudd from MICVA was saying, I need somebody to code this thing. She's like, all right, I might be able to do that. That was it. So it was, and then she didn't know how to code it, frankly. So Scott Robin, who works with us, mentored her to even know how to code it. So there's these teeny, we didn't do that much. I really didn't do that much. Scott didn't do that much. Hell, Kathy didn't do that much. We did teeny tiny little things. We hosted on our server teeny things that just remove a blocker, that allow them to move a little bit forward, that leverage good things that are already going on. I think that's the model, and I think that might be the answer to how we get there. Elena?
I just want to say how much it's impressed me, the culture of documentation, both on process and the technical, like how we're doing and what we're doing, that comes from the open source community is so relevant, even if you're not doing a coding project for nonprofits, right? And some of them are already doing it really well. Like we've worked with LISC for years. They pay scribes to go talk about how community members are doing the hard work of community building, and they document it. And I think that is so important. So I just encourage everybody, like when you're writing funding requests or talking about structuring projects, to build in that need for documentation, whether or not it's a coding project you're talking about doing, but just talking about the importance, because that's what allows things to spread in more lightweight ways, right? It's what allows us to pick up and read about what everyone's doing and just put in the work and make it happen. So it's something that this community, I think, takes for granted, the open source community, and that's a really important insight to share more broadly.
And at that, the time has come to consume crudité.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Desserts and snacks and then next door.
Yeah, I jumped in.
It's actually, it's interesting.